The courthouse steps swarmed with protesters and counter-protesters as Lieutenant Commander Nia Briggs was escorted inside, her decorated military career seemingly ending in disgrace. Just hours before her Medal of Honor ceremony, the first black female Navy SEAL sniper had been dramatically arrested, her wrists now bound by the country she'd bled to protect. Inside the tense courtroom, former teammates watched in disbelief while government prosecutors prepared to bury not just Briggs, but the damning evidence she'd uncovered in Afghanistan. As Judge Thompson called for her plea, Nia remained silent, her sniper's discipline unbroken even now. The sudden boom of the courtroom doors caused every head to turn as Admiral Vaughn strode in, his presence commanding instant silence. The classified operation they all thought buried was about to surface, and the powerful figures who'd orchestrated its cover-up had no idea what happened when you cornered a warrior who had nothing left to lose. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The courthouse steps were crowded with protesters, their signs bobbing in the air like buoys on a stormy sea. Some read "Free Briggs," while others proclaimed "Traitors deserve death." News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky as reporters frantically delivered updates to cameras. "We're live outside the federal courthouse, where Lieutenant Commander Nia Briggs, the first black female Navy SEAL sniper in U.S. history, is about to be arraigned on charges that have shocked the nation," a reporter announced breathlessly. Briggs was arrested yesterday during what should have been her Medal of Honor ceremony, in what many are calling either justice served or the greatest miscarriage of justice in military history. Inside, the marble-floored hallway fell silent as the heavy oak doors swung open. Lieutenant Commander Nia Briggs entered, her wrists and ankles bound by steel restraints that clinked with each measured step. Despite the orange jumpsuit that had replaced her dress blues, she carried herself with unmistakable military bearing. Her shoulders remained squared, her chin lifted, her dark eyes focused straight ahead. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Journalists scribbled furiously in notepads while sketch artists captured her profile. Nia's expression betrayed nothing. Not fear, not anger, not even confusion. Just the steady, calculating focus that had made her legendary behind a rifle scope. "All rise," the bailiff called out as Judge Elaine Thompson entered, her black robe swishing as she took her seat at the bench. The judge's steely gaze swept across the packed gallery before landing on Nia. "Please be seated," she said, her voice crisp and clear in the suddenly quiet room. "We are here for the arraignment of Lieutenant Commander Nia Briggs on charges of—" She paused, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed the document before her. "Breach of national security, unauthorized disclosure of classified information, and potential charges of treason to be determined." In the third row, 4 men in civilian clothes sat rigidly, their military haircuts and watchful eyes marking them as clearly as if they still wore their trident pins. Former members of SEAL Team 6, they exchanged glances that communicated volumes without a single word. "What the hell is happening?" One of them, Jackson Taylor, whispered to the man beside him. 24 hours ago, she was about to get the Medal of Honor. The other man, Mike Simmons, shook his head slightly. "Something's wrong. Nya wouldn't breach security, not after everything we've been through." "The accused will rise," Judge Thompson ordered. Nia stood, the chains at her ankles rattling softly. Assistant United States Attorney Philip Mercer approached the bench. Tall and lean with salt and pepper hair, he exuded the confidence of a man accustomed to winning. "Your Honor, Lieutenant Commander Briggs has deliberately and maliciously compromised national security by revealing classified operational details of a top-secret mission. The government requests she be held without bail, as she presents both a flight risk and an ongoing threat to national security." Judge Thompson peered at Nia over her reading glasses. "Lieutenant Commander Briggs, how do you plead?" The courtroom seemed to hold its breath collectively. Nia's attorney, a nervous-looking public defender who'd clearly been assigned the case hours earlier, placed a tentative hand on her arm. Nia remained silent, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the judge. "Lieutenant Commander, Judge," Thompson repeated, her tone sharpening. "I asked how you plead to these charges." Still, Nia said nothing. Her attorney cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my client wishes to reserve her plea until I need to hear from the defendant," Judge Thompson cut in. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Even the court reporter's fingers hovered motionless above her machine. From her seat in the back row, Department of Justice agent Camille Harris watched with intense interest. At 32, she was one of the youngest agents to reach her position in the DOJ's National Security Division. Something about this case had felt wrong from the moment the file had landed on her desk that morning. Unlike the other officials present, Camille's focus wasn't just on Naya's stoic face but on the details others missed. The unnecessary level of restraint for an officer with no history of violence except in combat, the rushed nature of the proceedings, the absence of any senior naval officers to represent the branch's interests. As Camille scanned the room, she noticed a man slip quietly through the side door, distinguished in his mid-60s, wearing an expensive suit that nonetheless couldn't disguise his military bearing. Senator James Williams, chairman of the Armed Services Committee. He took a seat in the back corner, his expression unreadable, as he studied Naya Briggs. The standoff between judge and defendant continued until Naya's attorney tried again. "Your Honor, given the sensitive nature of—" "I'm losing patience, Counselor," Judge Thompson warned. Suddenly a flash of memory seemed to cross Naya's face, the only emotion she'd shown since entering the courtroom. For just a second, those watching closely could see her somewhere else. The crack of gunfire, screams in a language few in the courtroom would understand, the weight of a rifle in her hands as she made impossible choices under fire. Then the moment passed, and her composure returned. "Lieutenant Commander Briggs," Judge Thompson said, her patience clearly wearing thin. "Your distinguished service record is not a shield from justice. This court demands your plea." Just as the judge prepared to issue a contempt charge, the main doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with force. The sound drew every eye in the room. A tall, imposing figure stood in the doorway. Admiral James Vaughn, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, walked into the courtroom with measured steps. His chest adorned with rows of combat decorations. He moved with the quiet authority of a man who had spent decades making life-or-death decisions. The gallery fell utterly silent. Even the prosecutor's confident demeanor faltered. Behind the Admiral, a wall of men and women in dark suits formed a protective barrier, elite agents from various intelligence branches, their presence as unexpected as it was intimidating. "This proceeding is now paused," Admiral Vaughn announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the room without him having to raise it. "I need to speak with the judge and counsel in chambers. Immediately." Judge Thompson's face registered shock, then a flash of annoyance at the interruption. But something in the Admiral's expression made her nod slowly. "This court will recess for 30 minutes, she declared, bringing down her gavel with more force than necessary. As the gallery erupted in excited whispers, Naya's eyes met the Admiral's for just a moment. No words passed between them, but something in her posture changed almost imperceptibly, a slight easing of tension, perhaps, or recognition of an ally in an unexpected place. Camille Harris watched the exchange with keen interest, her mind racing to connect pieces of a puzzle she couldn't fully see. She slipped out of her row and moved toward the exit, pulling out her phone to make a call. Whatever was happening here went far beyond a simple case of leaked information. The harsh Afghanistan sun beat down on the rocky outcroppings surrounding the valley. Through her rifle scope, Lieutenant Commander Naya Briggs watched the compound below with the patience of a predator. 2 years earlier, and worlds away from the courtroom where her fate now hung in the balance, Naya commanded Operation Glass Dagger, a mission so classified that only a handful of people in the Pentagon knew of its existence. "Target area secure, Commander," came the voice of Petty Officer First Class Reese Dalton through her earpiece. Positioned on the opposite ridge, Dalton served as her spotter and second-in-command for this mission. "Copy that," Naya responded, her voice barely above a whisper despite the fact that no one could possibly hear her from her position. "Team Bravo, status?" "In position, ma'am," replied Mike Simmons. "Eastern approach covered. Team Charlie ready. To move on your mark," added Jackson Taylor from his position with the third team. Nya took a slow, controlled breath as she surveyed the compound once more. From the outside, it appeared to be nothing more than a remote outpost, the kind of place that wouldn't warrant attention on any satellite footage. But intelligence from highly placed sources suggested otherwise. Remember, This is observation only, Naya reminded her team. We confirm the presence of the rogue unit, document their activities, and extract. Command wants evidence before they send in a larger force. What her team didn't know, what only Naya and Admiral Vaughn knew, was the true nature of their target. They weren't hunting terrorists or even Taliban leadership. They were tracking American operatives, a CIA-funded special unit codenamed Ember that had gone dark 3 months ago. Movement at the south entrance, Dalton reported. 2 vehicles approaching. Through her scope, Naya watched as a pair of unmarked SUVs pulled into the compound. Men in civilian clothing emerged, but their movements betrayed military training. One of them she recognized immediately, Colonel Marcus Reed, the presumed leader of Ember. Confirmed visual on primary target, she said quietly. As she adjusted her scope to follow Reed into the building, Dalton's voice came through again, but with a different tone. Commander, I'm picking up something on thermal that doesn't match the briefing. There are a lot more heat signatures in the eastern building than there should be. Nya frowned. How many? At least 20, maybe 30. And they're clustered, not moving like combatants. Something cold settled in Naya's stomach. Maintain position. I'm going to circle around for a better angle. Moving with the silent efficiency that had earned her legendary status among the SEALs, Naya repositioned herself on a rocky outcropping that gave her a view into the windows of the eastern building. What she saw made her blood run cold. Men, women and children, civilians, crowded into what appeared to be cells. Some wore the traditional clothing of local villages. Others didn't look Afghan at all. All appeared malnourished, frightened. Dalton, are you seeing this? She whispered. Affirmative, he replied, his voice tight. This isn't a base, it's a prison. Nya keyed her secure satellite communication. Device. Glass dagger to lighthouse. Priority transmission for Admiral Vaughn only. After a moment of static, Admiral Vaughn's voice came through. Go ahead, Glass Dagger. Sir, Ember isn't just operating independently. They're holding civilians against their will, multiple nationalities, including children. Request immediate extraction authorization. There was a long pause before Vaughn responded. Negative, Commander. Maintain observation. We need more intel before we act. Sir, with respect, these people need immediate medical attention. Some appear to be subjects of... She hesitated, struggling to process what she was seeing through her scope. Sir, I believe they're being used for some kind of testing. Another pause, longer this time. Commander Briggs, your orders remain unchanged. Document everything, but do not engage. We can't risk an international incident without ironclad proof. Understood, sir, Naya replied, though every instinct in her body screamed against the order. For 6 hours, her team maintained surveillance, documenting the comings and goings from the compound. Twice, Naya observed medical personnel entering the eastern building. Once, they removed what appeared to be a body. As night fell, Naya's resolve hardened. Team, new orders, she said over the secure channel. We're moving in. Commander? Simmons questioned. Those aren't our orders. I'm overriding previous directives based on humanitarian necessity, Naya replied. This is now a rescue operation. Team Bravo will create a diversion at the north perimeter. Team Charlie will secure the main building and communications. Dalton and I will extract the prisoners. There was a moment of silence before her team responded with a series of affirmatives. They trusted her judgment implicitly. They had followed her through hell before and would do so again. What Naya didn't know was that Dalton had already been compromised. Earlier that day, while she'd been focused on the compound, he had slipped away briefly to make contact with an operative from Black River, a private military contractor with deep ties to Ember's operation. As Naya and her team prepared to move, Dalton sent a brief text message from a burner phone. SEAL team moving in, Glass Dagger compromised. The assault began at 0200 hours. Team Bravo created the perfect diversion, a series of controlled explosions at the north perimeter that drew most of the compound's security. Team Charlie moved in with precision, securing the main building within minutes. Nya and Dalton approached the prison building from the south, eliminating 2 guards with silenced weapons before reaching the main door. "Cover me," Nia ordered, as she began working on the electronic lock. Inside, they found conditions even worse than they had appeared through the scope. 37 civilians, including 9 children, were being held in conditions that violated every Geneva Convention protocol. Many showed signs of medical experimentation, injection sites, surgical scars, monitoring devices attached to their bodies. "What the hell is this place?" Dalton whispered, his face pale even in the dim light. "Get these people out," Nia ordered, keeping her voice steady despite the horror surrounding them. "Team Charlie, we need immediate medical evacuation. For civilians." As they began freeing the prisoners, Nia discovered a locked room at the back of the facility. Breaking through, she found not more prisoners but a laboratory. Computer screens displayed molecular structures, viral loads, infection rates. A cold realization washed over her. This wasn't just imprisonment. It was a bioweapons testing facility, using human subjects. She quickly downloaded all the data she could find onto a secure drive as Dalton organized the evacuation of the prisoners. "Commander," Simmons's voice came urgently through her earpiece. "We've got a problem. Heavy reinforcements approaching from the south. At least 24, well armed. And they're not wearing Ember identification. These are Black River contractors." Nia's mind raced. Black River wasn't supposed to be anywhere near this operation. "Fall back to extraction point Bravo. Get those civilians out now." As she turned to leave the lab, she found Dalton standing in the doorway, his weapon raised and pointed directly at her. "I can't let you take that drive, Commander," he said, his voice strangely calm. Nia froze, her hand instinctively moving toward her sidearm. "Dalton, what are you doing?" "Following orders. My real orders." His expression remained neutral, professional. "Black River pays better than the Navy and they don't have as many rules." "You're selling out your country, your team," Nia said, her voice low and dangerous. "For what? Money." "For survival," Dalton replied. "This operation goes higher than, people who can make or break careers' lives. You really think Admiral Vaughn didn't know what was happening here? Why do you think he ordered us not to intervene?" For a fraction of a second, doubt flickered across Nia's face, and Dalton took advantage of the moment to lunge forward. But Nia hadn't earned her place in the SEALs by being slow. She sidestepped his attack, bringing her elbow down hard on his extended arm. His weapon clattered to the floor. What followed was a brutal close-quarters fight between 2 elite operators, who knew each other's moves intimately from years of training together. Dalton had size and strength on his side, but Nia had speed and a lifetime of having to prove herself in a world that underestimated her. In the end, it was Dalton who lay, unconscious, and Nia who emerged from the lab, blood trickling from a cut above her eye, the drive secured in her tactical vest. "Team Charlie, change of plans," she said into her comm. "Dalton is compromised. Consider him hostile." "Copy that," Taylor responded, though his voice betrayed his shock. "Civilians are loaded. We need to move now." As they regrouped outside, the first missiles hit the compound, Black River forces firing from the approaching helicopters. The ground shook with the impact, and flames began to engulf the buildings. "They're destroying the evidence," Nia realized. "Move out. Get to the extraction point." The team fought their way through the chaos, shepherding the terrified civilians toward the waiting helicopters. As they moved, Nia noticed a small girl, no more than 7 years old, frozen in fear as debris rained down around her. Without hesitation, Nia broke formation, sprinting through the firestorm to reach the child. She scooped the girl into her arms, just as a secondary explosion ripped through the compound's ammunition stores. The force of the blast threw them both forward, Nia twisting in midair to absorb the impact and shield the child. Pain lanced through her body as they hit the ground, but she didn't stop. Clutching the girl to her chest, she staggered to her feet and rejoined her team at the extraction point. As their helicopters lifted off, Nia looked back at the burning compound. The mission had gone catastrophically wrong, yet they had saved 37 lives that were never supposed to be there in the first place. But she knew, with cold certainty, that powerful people would not forgive that intervention. "Command isn't going to like this," Taylor said as they gained altitude. Nia checked the drive in her vest, then looked at the frightened civilians they'd rescued. Command can court-martial me if they want. I'll do the same thing again. What she didn't say, what she couldn't say to her team, was that the files she'd taken implicated not just Ember and Black River, but high-ranking officials in Washington, people with the power to make problems disappear, people like Admiral Vaughn. Back in the present-day courtroom, Prosecutor Mercer's voice cut through Naya's memories. Lieutenant Commander Briggs willfully disobeyed direct orders during a classified operation, resulting in American casualties and a diplomatic incident of the highest order. The judge's chamber's door opened. Judge Thompson returned to the bench, her face noticeably paler than when she had left. Behind her came Admiral Vaughn, his expression granite hard. "This court will resume," Judge Thompson announced, her voice slightly less certain than before. "In light of new information presented by Admiral Vaughn, I am ordering a classified session. All members of the press and public are to leave the courtroom immediately." As the bailiffs began clearing the gallery, protests erupted from the journalists present. Senator Williams remained seated, his gaze locked with Admiral Vaughn's across the room, a silent confrontation between two powerful men. Camille Harris slipped back into the courtroom just before the doors closed, her DOJ credentials giving her access that even senior reporters couldn't match. She had spent the recess making calls, pulling strings, accessing databases that few knew existed. What she had found confirmed her suspicions. This case wasn't about a breach of security. It was about silencing a witness. As the courtroom cleared, leaving only essential personnel, Admiral Vaughn approached Naya. He leaned in close, speaking just loud enough for her to hear. "I couldn't stop them from bringing you in," he said, "but I can make sure you get out." Naya's eyes flashed with anger and betrayal. "You gave the order to stand down. You knew what was happening there." "I didn't know everything," Vaughn replied, genuine regret in his voice. "But I know now, and so does the president." Before Naya could respond, Prosecutor Mercer approached them. "Admiral Vaughn, this intervention is highly irregular. Lieutenant Commander Briggs compromised a black operation and saved 37 innocent people from being used as lab rats in an illegal bioweapons program," Vaughn cut in sharply. "A program, Mr. Mercer, that your office helped cover up." Mercer's face drained of color. "That's a serious allegation, Admiral." "It's not an allegation," Vaughn replied. "It's a fact, one that's about to become very public unless these charges are dropped." From her place at the defense table, Naya watched this exchange with the same calculating focus she applied to battlefield situations. She had spent 2 years in silence, following orders even after the mission, protecting the civilians they had rescued by keeping their existence secret. But that silence had its limits. As the classified session began, Judge Thompson looked directly at Naya. "Lieutenant Commander, I believe it's time you told this court exactly what happened during Operation Glass Dagger." Naya nodded slowly, her chains rattling softly as she stood. For the first time since entering the courtroom, she spoke. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear and unwavering, "you have no idea what we uncovered." The classified session had ended hours ago, but its revelation still echoed through the empty courthouse corridors. Agent Camille Harris waited in the shadow of a marble column, checking her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. Her breath caught when she finally spotted Admiral Vaughn exiting through a side door, his security detail conspicuously absent. "Admiral," she called out, stepping forward, "a moment of your time." Vaughn paused, studying her with the measured gaze of a man who'd spent decades evaluating threats. "Agent Harris, I was wondering when DOJ would make their move." "This isn't official," Camille said, holding up her empty hands. "I switched off my recorder. This is just between us." Something in her tone must have convinced him. Vaughn nodded, toward a small alcove away from the security cameras. Once they were both tucked into the shadowed space, he spoke first. "You've been digging into Glass Dagger." It wasn't a question. Camille didn't bother denying it. "The official record doesn't match what I'm seeing in that courtroom. Lieutenant Commander Briggs is facing treason charges for what appears to be a textbook rescue operation." Vaughn's weathered face revealed nothing but his eyes. Those were different. Behind the professional mask, Camille recognized the look of a man carrying a burden too heavy to set down. "They're burying her because she saw something she wasn't supposed to," he said finally. "And so did I." "The bioweapons program?" "That's part of it." Vaughn checked his surroundings before continuing. Project Echo wasn't just about developing new weapons. It was about testing existing ones on subjects who couldn't fight back, who wouldn't be missed. Camille felt her stomach turn. "And when Briggs intervened? She became a liability. We all did." The Admiral's gaze drifted to the courthouse windows. "I've made many difficult calls in my career, Agent Harris. Sending teams into danger, knowing not everyone would come back. But I've never ordered anyone to look the other way while civilians were—" He didn't finish the sentence. "Then why did you tell her team to stand down that day?" Vaughn's jaw tightened. "Because at the time, I believed what I was told, that interfering would compromise years of intelligence gathering. By the time I realized the truth and tried to countermand the order, it was too late. Briggs had already gone in. So you're helping her now to ease your conscience?" "I'm helping her because it's the right thing to do," Vaughn snapped. Then, more quietly, "And yes, because I owe her that much." Back in her apartment that night, Camille spread dozens of files across her kitchen table. Most were heavily redacted, black bars obscuring names, dates, locations. But patterns emerged in what wasn't hidden: Operation Glass Dagger, Project Echo, Black River Consulting, Senator Williams's private investment portfolio, all connected by invisible threads that she was slowly bringing to light. Her phone buzzed, with a text from an unknown number. "Check your mail." Wary but curious, Camille went to her door. A plain manila envelope had been slipped underneath. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. "Security footage, Operation Glass Dagger. Destroy." After viewing, she plugged the drive into her computer, half expecting it to be encrypted beyond her clearance. Instead, video began to play immediately, grainy footage from body cameras worn by Naya's SEAL team during the raid. Camille watched, transfixed, as Naya Briggs moved through the compound with lethal efficiency, eliminating armed guards with precision before turning her attention to the locked cells. The footage showed Naya kneeling beside emaciated prisoners, some barely conscious, speaking gentle words of reassurance as she broke their restraints. One sequence showed Naya lifting a child into her arms, shielding the small body with her own, as explosions rocked the compound. Another captured her administering emergency medical care to a woman with infected injection sites covering her arms. "This isn't a breach of national security," Camille whispered to her empty apartment. "This is a cover-up." The next morning, Judge Thompson received a similar package. Unlike Camille, she viewed the footage in her chambers with the court's security officer present, standard procedure for evidence in classified cases. What wasn't standard was the cue, Judge's reaction. "Get me Admiral Vaughn," she ordered, her normally composed demeanor shaken, "and clear my docket for the rest of the day." At a small diner across town, two men sat in a corner booth, coffee cooling untouched before them. Jackson Taylor and Mike Simmons, former members of Naya's SEAL team, had civilian jobs now, but their vigilance remained military sharp as they surveyed the other patrons. "She's being railroaded," Taylor said quietly. "The question is, do we stand up and potentially go down with her, or keep our heads down and live with it?" Simmons tapped his fingers on the laminate tabletop, a nervous habit he developed after leaving the service. "We took an oath to the Constitution, not to people using it as cover for war crimes." "Our families, Mike. Think about what they could do to our families." "I am thinking about them," Simmons replied. "I'm thinking about what I'll tell my daughter when she asks me where I was when they sacrificed Naya Briggs to protect the powerful." He paused. "I can't live with that silence." Taylor nodded slowly. "Decision made. Then we go on record. Together." Meanwhile, in the wood-paneled office of Senator James Williams, a very different conversation was taking place. The senator paced behind his desk, while a man in an expensive suit sat calmly in a leather chair opposite. "This should have been handled quietly," Williams hissed. "Now we have a circus that's drawing attention to exactly what we wanted buried." Lawrence Pierce, CEO of Black River Consulting, remained unruffled. The situation is contained, Senator. Briggs will be convicted under the Espionage Act. The classified nature of the trial means no public record. And Admiral Vaughn? He seems to have found his conscience rather suddenly. Pierce smiled thinly. We have contingencies for Vaughn. His involvement in authorizing the original Operation Glass Dagger makes him vulnerable. If he pushes too hard, we release documentation showing he knew about the civilian testing program from the beginning. William stopped pacing. Can that be traced back to me? Of course not. Your investment in Black River is through a web of shell companies. On paper, you've never heard of us. The senator nodded, appeased, but still anxious. What about the DOJ? Agent who's been sniffing around? Harris? We're watching her, Pierce assured him. One step out of line and her career is over. He leaned forward. More importantly, I've drafted new legislation for you to introduce. It expands the definition of treason to include whistleblowers who expose classified operations, regardless of criminal activity uncovered. With the right framing, we can fast-track it through committee while public attention is on the Briggs case. William smiled for the first time. Using her to set the precedent that will prevent future Briggs situations. I like it. The next day, Camille Harris was summoned to her supervisor's office. Deputy Director Frank Wilson didn't offer her a seat when she entered, nor did he look up from the file open on his desk. Agent Harris, you've been reassigned, effective immediately. Camille kept her expression neutral. May I ask where? Field office in Anchorage. The paperwork's already processed. Alaska? On what grounds? Wilson finally looked up. On the grounds that I said so. But off the record, you're digging into things above your clearance level. Glass Dagger is off limits. I haven't accessed any files beyond my authorization, Camille countered. Don't play games, Harris. We both know what you've been doing. Wilson's voice lowered. Take the reassignment. Go cool off in Alaska for a year, and maybe you'll have a career to come back to. Keep pushing, and you won't just lose your job. The threat hung in the air between them. Camille thought of the footage she'd seen, of Nia Briggs risking everything to save innocence when she could have simply followed orders. Is that all, sir? She asked quietly. Wilson nodded, already returning to his paperwork. Flight leaves tomorrow. Don't miss it. Camille walked out without another word, her decision already made. She wouldn't be on that flight. Halfway across the world, in a small apartment in Virginia, Fareed Nasser watched the news coverage of Nia's case with growing agitation. As the former translator for Nia's SEAL team, he had been there that night, in Afghanistan. He had helped comfort the rescued prisoners in their native languages, had assisted in treating their wounds, had promised them that America would bring those responsible to justice. Now he was watching that promise unravel on live television. His phone rang, a secure line used only by a handful of people. Yes? Mr. Nasser. Admiral Vaughn's voice. I think it's time. I've been ready, Fareed replied. But they denied my visa application to testify. That's been resolved. There's a car waiting outside your building. It will take you to Andrews Air Force Base. From there, you'll be brought directly to the courthouse. Fareed looked out his window. Sure enough, a black SUV idled by the curb. I'll be right down. What neither man knew was that their call had been monitored. Within minutes, a Black River tactical team was dispatched to intercept Fareed before he could reach the courthouse. Back in court, the atmosphere had changed dramatically from the previous day. Judge Thompson's demeanor had shifted from skeptical to troubled. Prosecutor Mercer seemed less confident, more defensive. And Nia Briggs, while still in restraints, now had a team of military lawyers flanking her instead of the overwhelmed public defender. The gallery, cleared of media but filled with military and intelligence officials, buzzed with tension as Mercer approached the bench with a digital evidence tablet. Your Honor, the government wishes to present classified footage recovered from Lieutenant Commander Briggs's personal effects. This evidence clearly shows her acting as a rogue operator, disregarding chain of command, and endangering American assets in the field. Judge Thompson nodded. Proceed. The courtroom lights dimmed as screens. descended from the ceiling. The footage that began to play showed select moments from the raid, edited to remove context. Naya giving orders that contradicted her official mission parameters. The confrontation with Dalton, framed to make it appear that Naya had attacked a loyal team member. The destruction of the compound, presented as if Naya had ordered it to destroy evidence rather than Black River's attempt to eliminate witnesses. From his seat at the defense table, Admiral Vaughn's face darkened. He rose to his feet. "Your Honor, this footage has been doctored." Mercer turned, affronted. "That's a serious accusation, Admiral." "It's not an accusation. It's a fact." Vaughn reached into his briefcase and removed a sealed folder stamped with presidential seals. "I have here executive orders authorizing the full unaltered footage to be entered into evidence, along with operational details of Project Echo that the prosecution has conveniently omitted." The courtroom erupted in chaos. Senator Williams leapt to his feet shouting objections. Prosecutor Mercer demanded the defense's evidence be reviewed in a separate hearing. Security personnel moved to positions around the room as tensions escalated. Through it all, Nia remained seated, watching the confusion with the same calm focus she applied to everything. This, too, was a battlefield of sorts, and she had survived worse. Judge Thompson brought down her gavel repeatedly, calling for order. When the room finally quieted, she fixed Vaughn with a stern gaze. "Admiral, approach the bench with your evidence." As Vaughn moved forward, the courtroom doors burst open once more. Fareed Nasser, his face bruised and his clothing torn, staggered in supported by Camille Harris. "Your Honor," Camille called out, her DOJ credentials held high. "This witness was just attacked by armed men attempting to prevent his testimony. I have reason to believe they were working for Black River Consulting, acting on orders related to this case." Senator Williams went pale. Prosecutor Mercer began frantically whispering to his assistants, and Judge Thompson, surveying the chaos before her, made a decision that would alter the course of the trial. "This court will hear the unaltered evidence and testimony from all relevant witnesses," she declared, beginning with the full operational details of Project Echo. Admiral Vaughn stepped forward, placing his sealed documents on the bench. "Your Honor, what you're about to see links a private military contractor, a classified bioweapons program, and elements within our own government in a conspiracy that Lieutenant Commander Briggs uncovered at great personal risk." The screens in the courtroom flickered to life once more, this time showing the unedited footage. As the truth of Operation Glass Dagger unfolded before the stunned courtroom, the full weight of what Naya had discovered, and what powerful people had tried to hide, became devastatingly clear. The footage ended, leaving the courtroom in stunned silence. For several long seconds, no one moved. Then, somewhere in the back row, a veteran began to sob quietly. Judge Thompson removed her glasses, pinching the bridge of her nose. When she looked up, her eyes were rimmed with red. "This court will recess for 30 minutes. As officials filed, out in shocked silence, Nia remained at the defense table, her shoulders finally beginning to sag under the weight of 2 years of isolation and accusation. For the first time since her arrest, the mask of perfect military composure cracked. When the courtroom emptied except for her attorneys and 2 security officers, Naya buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I begged them," she whispered, so softly that her lead attorney had to lean close to hear. "I begged command to send medical evac for those people. There was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 5. They were injecting her daily with some kind of viral agent, monitoring how long it took for symptoms to appear." Her voice broke. "We had room in the helicopters. We could have gotten them all out. But someone higher up ordered our medical transport diverted, said it was a contamination risk. Those people needed help, and I was told to leave them to die." The attorney placed a hand on her shoulder, at a loss for words in the face of such raw pain. In that moment, Nia Briggs wasn't the legendary SEAL sniper, the woman who had broken barriers and set records. She was simply a soldier who had seen too much and carried too heavy a burden for too long. In the judge's chambers, Admiral Vaughn sat alone with Judge Thompson, who was reviewing Additional documents with growing horror. "The order to retreat and burn the evidence came from your office, Admiral," she said, her voice tight with anger. "Your signature is right here." Vaughn nodded heavily. "I gave the initial order based on information provided to me by intelligence officials. I was told the compound contained terrorist leaders planning attacks on American forces. When Lieutenant Commander Briggs reported finding civilians instead, I tried to countermand my order." He passed another document across the desk. "This is the communication log. By the time my countermand reached the field, Black River forces had already begun the bombardment." Judge Thompson studied the timestamp. 17 minutes. 17 minutes between your original order and your attempt to reverse it. 17 minutes in which I failed 37 innocent people and one of the finest officers I've ever commanded. Vaughn's voice was hollow with regret. "I've spent the last 2 years trying to make it right." Outside the courthouse, Camille, Harris sat with Fareed Nasser in a secure vehicle, helping him apply an ice pack to his bruised face. "They knew exactly when I was leaving my apartment," Fareed said. "If you hadn't shown up when you did." "I've been expecting something like this," Camille replied. "After what happened to the other witnesses." Fareed looked at her sharply. "What other witnesses?" Camille hesitated, then decided he deserved the truth. 3 people who were rescued during Glass Dagger have died under suspicious circumstances. In the past month. Car accident, home invasion, apparent suicide. "And still you got involved, knowing the risk?" She thought about her supervisor's threat, the assignment to Alaska, the warning to stop digging. "Some things are worth the risk, Mr. Nasser." Fareed nodded slowly. "Lieutenant Commander Briggs said something similar that night in Afghanistan, when I asked her why she was risking her career to save strangers. The court reconvened with a different energy, the performative aspects of legal procedure stripped away by the gravity of what had been revealed." Naya, composed once more but with the shadow of her emotional breakdown still visible in her reddened eyes, stood as Judge Thompson returned to the bench. "In light of the evidence presented, this court will now hear testimony from witnesses to the events of Operation Glass Dagger," Judge Thompson announced. "The court calls Fareed Nasser." Fareed took the stand, still bearing the marks of his earlier assault. He described in detail the night of the raid, the condition of the prisoners, Naya's leadership during the evacuation, and the bombardment that had nearly killed them all as they fled. Lieutenant Commander Briggs carried 2 children herself. He testified. "When our helicopter was hit, she used her body to shield them from debris. Later, when we landed at a medical outpost, she gave her blood for transfusions. 3 pints. The doctors told her to stop, that she was risking her own life, but she refused until all the critical patients were stabilized." As he spoke, Camille noticed something unexpected, Judge Thompson repeatedly touching a small photograph she kept beside her legal pad. Camille shifted position slightly to see it better. A man in a Navy uniform, his features similar enough to the judge's to suggest a family relationship. After Fareed's testimony, the prosecution's case continued to unravel. 2 more members of Naya's SEAL team, Mike Simmons and Jackson Taylor, came forward to corroborate the events. Then came the moment that changed everything. Escorted by military police, former Petty Officer Reese Dalton was brought into the courtroom in shackles. "The government calls Reese Dalton," Prosecutor Mercer announced, a final desperate attempt to salvage his case. Dalton took the stand, his arrogant demeanor a stark contrast to Naya's dignified composure. But as questioning began, it became clear that Dalton had made a calculation of his own. With Black River executives now under federal investigation and Senator Williams distancing himself from the scandal, Dalton had decided to save himself. "Did Lieutenant Commander Briggs disobey direct orders during Operation Glass Dagger?" Mercer asked. "Yes," Dalton answered. "She disobeyed orders to let innocent people die." Mercer's face tightened. "Please answer only the question asked." "I'm answering," Dalton insisted. "You can't understand her actions without understanding the context. We were ordered to observe and report, even after discovering civilians being used as test subjects for biological weapons. And you opposed her decision to intervene?" Dalton's laugh was bitter. "I did worse than oppose it. I betrayed her." He looked directly at Naya for the first time. I was on Black River's payroll for months before that mission. They wanted to know which SEAL teams were getting close to their operations. The courtroom erupted in murmurs until Judge Thompson gavelled for silence. When Lieutenant Commander Briggs decided to rescue those prisoners, I warned Black River. That's why they were waiting with missile strikes. That's why so many of those people died anyway, after we got them out. Dalton's voice grew quieter. Their blood is on my hands, not hers. Why? Naya's voice cut through the courtroom. It was the first time she had directly addressed Dalton since the trial began. Why did you do it? Judge Thompson should have stopped this exchange, but she let it continue, watching intently. Dalton couldn't meet her eyes. They had leverage, my sister's family in Pakistan. They threatened them if I didn't cooperate. He finally looked up. But that doesn't excuse what I did. Nothing does. If your family was threatened, you should have come to me, Naya said, her voice firm but not unkind. We would have protected them. I know that now. Dalton's shoulders slumped. I've had 2 years in a cell to think about it. As testimony continued, the truth emerged piece by piece. Naya hadn't leaked classified information as accused. She had followed proper channels reporting the bioweapons program up the chain of command. But those reports had been buried by the same officials who were invested in Black River's operations. When official channels failed, Naya had made the decision to protect the rescued civilians by keeping them hidden, working with trusted NGOs, to relocate them across Europe and Canada with new identities. Her silence wasn't an admission of guilt, it was protection for people who would be eliminated if found. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had grown as word spread of the dramatic testimony taking place within. Veterans groups, human rights activists, and ordinary citizens gathered, their chants of "Free Briggs" growing louder by the hour. The tension reached its peak when Senator Williams attempted to leave through a side exit, only to be confronted by a wall of protesters. His security detail hustled him back inside, where Camille Harris was waiting. Senator Williams, she said, her DOJ badge displayed prominently. I need to ask you some questions about your investment in Black River Consulting. Williams's face hardened. I have no comment on ongoing legal matters, Agent Harris. And if I were you, I'd be very careful about making accusations against a sitting. Senator, this isn't an accusation. It's an investigation. Camille held up a folder. We have financial records showing your offshore accounts received payments from Black River on the same day you blocked congressional oversight of private military contractors operating in Afghanistan. The senator's composed facade cracked. You have no idea what forces you're playing with, Agent Harris. One phone call from me and what? Admiral Vaughn's voice interrupted as he rounded the corner. You'll have her silenced like you tried to silence Briggs? Like you silenced those witnesses? He stepped closer to Williams, his physical presence intimidating despite his age. That game is over, Senator. Back in the courtroom, Judge Thompson was engaged in her own internal struggle. Throughout the day's testimony, she had repeatedly touched the photograph on her bench, a habit that hadn't escaped Naya's notice. During a brief recess, Naya approached the bench. Your Honor, if I may, the man in your photograph. He was a SEAL, wasn't he? The judge stiffened. My brother, Commander Michael Thompson. He died in Afghanistan 2 years ago. During Operation Glass Dagger, Naya said softly, recognition dawning. He was one of the support team pilots. The Black River missiles hit his helicopter first. Judge Thompson's professional mask slipped. He was flying a medical evacuation chopper, unarmed. They shot him down anyway. I didn't know he was your brother. I'm so sorry. When I was assigned this case, I should have recused myself, the judge admitted. But I wanted to see the person responsible for the operation that killed him. I wanted to hate you. And now? Naya asked quietly. Judge Thompson looked at the photograph once more. Now I know my brother died trying to save innocent people, just like you tried to do. She straightened, composure returning. I'll be making a statement when we reconvene. The final session of the day began with Judge Thompson addressing the court. Having reviewed the evidence and testimony presented, I find that Lieutenant Commander Briggs acted not with criminal intent, but with moral courage in the face of extraordinary circumstances. This court is moving to dismiss all charges related to Operation Glass Dagger. A wave of relief swept through Naya's supporters, but the moment was short-lived. As Judge Thompson continued, the main doors of the courtroom crashed open. A team of federal agents in tactical gear entered, led by a stern-faced woman in a dark suit. "This court is now adjourned," the woman announced, flashing credentials that made even Judge Thompson pause. "Lieutenant Commander Naya Briggs is being remanded to federal custody on charges of high treason under National Security Directive 1949. "On whose authority?" Admiral Vaughn demanded, rising to his feet. "The highest," the woman replied coolly. "Director Kessler, Office of International Security. Lieutenant Commander Briggs will be transported to a secure federal facility pending a closed tribunal." As federal agents moved to take custody of Naya, Judge Thompson made one final effort to maintain control of her courtroom. "This proceeding is not concluded. You have no jurisdiction here." "With respect, Your Honor, we have jurisdiction everywhere when it comes to matters of national security." Director Kessler nodded to her team. "Take the prisoner." Naya stood tall as the federal agents approached. She had fought this battle in good faith, through proper channels, only to find that the system she had sworn to defend was being used against her. But as the new handcuffs were placed on her wrists, replacing the ones removed just moments earlier, her eyes found Camille's in the gallery. A silent message passed between them. This fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The black SUV carrying Naya Briggs cut through the night, its windows tinted to opacity. Inside, Director Kessler sat across from her prisoner, studying the woman who had caused so much trouble. "You know," Kessler said conversationally, "most people would have broken by now. Taken a deal, given names, anything to save themselves." Naya's wrists were bound by reinforced cuffs, but her gaze remained unbowed. "I'm not most people." "No," Kessler agreed. "You're not. That's what makes you so dangerous." Through the window, Naya watched familiar landmarks disappear as they headed away from the city. No highway signs, no indication of their destination. They had been driving for hours. "The Office of International Security," Naya finally said. "I've never heard of it." Kessler smiled thinly. "That's rather the point, Lieutenant Commander. We handle situations too sensitive even for the intelligence community." "You mean you clean up messes that would embarrass powerful people?" The director's smile vanished. "I mean we protect this country from threats, both foreign and domestic. Project Echo was developing countermeasures against the next generation of bioweapons. Your intervention set that research back by years." "Research?" Naya's voice sharpened. "You were experimenting on children." "Regrettable collateral damage in pursuit of national security," Kessler replied without emotion. "A concept I'd expect a decorated SEAL to understand." Naya leaned forward, despite the restraints. "I understand the difference between necessary sacrifice and crimes against humanity. That line seems to have blurred for you, Director." The SUV turned onto an unmarked gravel road, then through a checkpoint guarded by men in unmarked tactical gear. They approached what appeared to be an abandoned mining facility, its entrance camouflaged to blend with the surrounding landscape. As the vehicle stopped, Kessler checked her watch. "Welcome to your new home, Lieutenant Commander, at least until your tribunal, which I should mention will not include witnesses, a jury, or press coverage." Naya was escorted through a series of security checkpoints, each taking her deeper underground. The facility was a maze of sterile corridors, surveillance cameras, and armed guards. Finally, she was brought to a cell, 6 by 8 feet, with nothing but a metal bed frame, a toilet, and a sink. "You'll be interrogated in the morning," the guard informed her before sealing the heavy door. Alone for the first time since her arrest, Naya methodically inspected her cell, testing the limits of her confinement with the same precision she'd once used to evaluate sniper positions. No windows, no vents large enough for escape. The door, solid metal with a small observation window, was controlled remotely. Even for someone with her training, this place was escape-proof. She sat on the edge of the bed, closed her eyes, and began to regulate her breathing. The same technique she'd used during long missions when movement would give away her position. Patience, observation, waiting for the right moment. These had kept her alive in war zones. They would serve her now. Back in Washington, Judge Elaine Thompson sat in her chambers, a glass of bourbon untouched before her. The day's events replayed in her mind, the testimony, the evidence, her brother's photograph, and then the federal agents storming her courtroom. In 20 years on the bench, she had never felt so powerless. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Her clerk entered, looking nervous. "Judge Thompson? There's someone here to see you. She says it's about the Briggs case." "I'm not taking any visitors," Thompson began, but fell silent when Camille Harris stepped into the room. "Your Honor," Camille said, "I apologize for the intrusion, but time is critical. Lieutenant Commander Briggs has been taken to a black site facility." Thompson set down her glass. "Agent Harris, you realize you're putting your career at risk coming here." "With respect, Your Honor, my career became secondary the moment I saw what they're trying to hide." Camille placed a folder on the judge's desk. "This is evidence that OIS has been operating an extrajudicial detention program for years. They don't just hold terrorists, they hold American citizens who threaten to expose government misconduct." Thompson leafed through the documents, her judicial detachment crumbling with each page. "How did you get this?" "I followed the federal agents after they left your courtroom. They took her to a holding facility in Maryland before transferring her to the black site. I managed to track the transport route." Camille hesitated. "I also accessed OIS secure servers." "You hacked a federal intelligence agency?" Thompson's eyebrows shot up. "Not exactly. I had help from someone who owed Lieutenant Commander Briggs his life." Camille pulled out her phone and showed the judge a map. "She's being held here, a decommissioned mining complex repurposed as a detention center. Director Kessler calls it the Hole." Judge Thompson studied the location. "Even with this information, I have no jurisdiction over OIS facilities. They operate under executive authority. That's why I need your help to reach someone who does have that authority," Camille replied. "Admiral Vaughn." Miles away, Admiral Vaughn was already engaged in his own battle. Summoned to a late-night meeting at the Pentagon, he found himself facing a panel of stern-faced officials, including the Secretary of Defense. "Admiral Vaughn, your actions today have raised serious concerns about your judgment," the Secretary began. "Interfering with a federal case, submitting classified materials without proper clearance. With respect, Mr. Secretary, every document I submitted was cleared through the proper channels," Vaughn interrupted. "Not through our channels," countered a thin man at the end of the table. Thomas Reed, Deputy Director of the CIA, rarely attended such meetings in person. His presence signaled the gravity of the situation. "Because your channels are compromised," Vaughn replied bluntly. Project Echo was never authorized by Congress or the President. It was a rogue operation funded through black budget allocations that were supposed to go to counterterrorism. The Secretary shifted uncomfortably. "These are serious allegations, Admiral." "They're not allegations, they're facts." Vaughn placed a thumb drive on the table. "This contains financial records linking Black River Consulting to Project Echo, along with documentation of every test conducted on those civilians. I've already sent copies to secure locations, to be released if anything happens to Lieutenant Commander Briggs or myself." Reed's face darkened. "That sounds dangerously close to blackmail, Admiral." "I prefer to call it insurance," Vaughn replied evenly. "Briggs is being held illegally at an OIS black site. I want her released and all charges dropped." Before anyone could respond, Vaughn's secure phone buzzed. The message from Camille Harris was brief. "Found her. OIS Facility Number 7, tribunal scheduled for 0600. Vaughn stood. "Gentlemen, we'll have to continue this discussion later. It seems I have a more pressing engagement." Across town, in a sparsely furnished apartment, Eli Chen, former NSA cryptologist and the someone who owed Lieutenant Commander Briggs his life that Camille had mentioned, was deep in the digital labyrinth of OIS's secure network. His fingers flew across 3 keyboards as screens filled with code, schematics, and security protocols. Come on, he muttered, bypassing firewalls and security measures that would have stopped most government hackers in their tracks. Eli wasn't most hackers. A window popped open on his center screen. Access granted. OIS Central Server. Gotcha, he whispered triumphantly, navigating to a folder labeled Black Site Ghost Protocol, Class Omega. What he found inside made his blood run cold. Video files, hundreds of them, documenting years of illegal experimentation on unwitting subjects. Medical reports detailing symptoms, progression rates, mortality statistics, and authorizing signatures, including Director Kessler's, on every test approval form. Eli downloaded everything, his hands shaking slightly as the files transferred. When his phone rang, he answered without checking the caller ID. Tell me you found something, Camille's voice came through. More than something, Eli replied, his voice grim. I found everything. Video proof of high-ranking officials approving bioweapon tests on civilians during Briggs's mission. Kessler's signature is on every authorization. But Camille, this goes way beyond Echo. They've been doing this for years. There was silence on the line. Then, send everything to the secure server I set up. And Eli, be careful. These people don't play by any rules. Dawn was breaking when Naya was taken from her cell to an interrogation room. Sleep-deprived and hungry, she still maintained her composure as Director Kessler entered, accompanied by 2 analysts carrying files. I hope you rested well, Lieutenant Commander, Kessler said, taking a seat across from Naya. We have a long day ahead of us. Am I being charged with something specific, or is this just a fishing expedition? Naya asked. Kessler smiled. Let's start with something simple. Operation Glass Dagger. Who authorized you to change the mission parameters from surveillance to extraction? No one, Naya answered honestly. I made that call in the field when I discovered civilians being tortured. And yet, Kessler continued, sliding a document across the table, we have a communication from Admiral Vaughn, sent 12 hours before your team deployed, instructing you to look specifically for evidence of Project Echo. Naya stared at the document, genuine confusion crossing her face for the first time. That's not possible. My orders were surveillance only. Admiral Vaughn never mentioned Project Echo before deployment. Are you calling this document a forgery? I'm saying I never received it, Naya replied, carefully studying the paper more closely. The header, the formatting, it looked authentic. But the implication was clear. Someone was setting up Admiral Vaughn, suggesting he had sent Naya as a mole to expose Echo. And suddenly, with crystal clarity, Naya understood the game. You're not after me, she said slowly. I'm bait. You want Admiral Vaughn. Kessler's expression remained neutral, but the slight tightening around her eyes confirmed Naya's suspicion. Vaughn was always the target, Kessler acknowledged finally. His position gives him access to intelligence, oversight committees, military appropriations, classified operations across all branches. When he started asking questions about Echo 2 years ago, he became a liability. So why come after me now? Why not take him out directly? Because Vaughn is politically protected. You, despite your impressive record, are not. By arresting you, we forced his hand. He had to either abandon you or expose himself by coming to your defense. Kessler leaned forward. He chose the latter, as we knew he would. His testimony yesterday gave us all we need to remove him permanently. Naya's mind raced. If what Kessler was saying was true, then Vaughn had been investigating Echo independently, perhaps even before Glass Dagger. Had he suspected what was happening and sent her team to confirm it? Had the order to stand down been a cover? Why tell me this? Naya asked. Because it doesn't matter what you know anymore, Kessler replied coldly. In a few hours, both you and Admiral Vaughn will face a tribunal that will find you guilty of treason. The penalty, as I'm sure you're aware, is death. Miles away, Camille Harris sat across from Admiral Vaughn in a secure safe house, reviewing the files Eli had extracted from the OIS server. This goes beyond anything I imagined, Vaughn said, his face ashen as he viewed footage of Project Echo's experiments. They weren't just developing bioweapons. They were testing delivery methods, infection rates, mortality statistics, using human beings as lab rats. And it wasn't just Echo, Camille added, pulling up additional files. There were at least 7 other projects, all operating under similar protocols, all unauthorized, all using Black River as operational support. Vaughn rubbed his face, suddenly looking every year of his age. I've been a fool, Agent Harris. 2 years ago I received intelligence suggesting unusual activity at that compound. I sent Briggs' team to investigate, thinking it was a terrorist cell. When she reported civilians being held, I tried to reverse my stand-down order, but Black River had already moved to eliminate witnesses, Camille finished. Yes. And afterward, when Briggs brought me the evidence she'd recovered, I thought the right approach was to work through official channels. I took it to the Joint Chiefs, to the Director of National Intelligence. Vaughn's voice hardened. That's when the cover-up began. Briggs was reassigned to increasingly dangerous missions. The civilians she'd rescued started dying in accidents, and I was suddenly facing early retirement. So you both went silent to protect the survivors, Camille concluded, until they arrested her during the Medal of Honor ceremony. The medal was supposed to be their way of buying her silence permanently, Vaughn explained. When she made it clear she wouldn't be silenced, they moved to Plan B. Camille's phone buzzed. A text from Eli. Tribunal moved up. RO600 today. Need to move now. She showed Vaughn the message. We're out of time. The Admiral stood. Decision made. Then we take this to the only person who can stop it. Naya sat alone in a stark room that served as OIS's version of a courtroom. No windows, no spectators, just a panel of 3 stern-faced officials behind a raised bench. Director Kessler stood as prosecutor. The chair for defense counsel remained empty. Where is my attorney? Naya asked. National security tribunals don't require defense counsel, one of the panel members informed her. Your service record will serve as character witness. The absurdity of it might have made her laugh if the situation weren't so dire. Her entire career, her sacrifices, her accomplishments, reduced to a piece of paper that would be ignored by people who had already decided her fate. The proceedings began with a reading of the charges: treason, espionage, unauthorized disclosure of classified information, insubordination. Each carried penalties ranging from life imprisonment to death. As evidence was presented, all carefully selected and edited to paint Naya as a rogue operator, she remained silent. This wasn't a trial. It was theater. The verdict had been determined before she entered the room. Her thoughts drifted to the civilians she'd saved. Had it been worth it, knowing it would end like this? The face of that little girl came to mind, terrified, malnourished, yet still finding the strength to smile when Naya carried her to safety. Yes, it had been worth it, even knowing the cost. The sound of the door opening drew Nia back to the present. A young officer entered, approaching the panel with a sealed envelope. The center judge opened it, his expression changing as he read its contents. This tribunal will recess for 15 minutes, he announced abruptly. As the panel filed out, Nia remained seated, puzzled by the interruption. Minutes later, the door opened again, but instead of the tribunal panel, Admiral Vaughn entered, accompanied by 2 presidential Secret Service agents. Admiral, Nia said, rising to her feet. What's happening? A correction, of course, Lieutenant Commander. Vaughn's voice carried the authority of his rank, but his eyes held something else. Regret, perhaps, or atonement. You're being released into my custody by presidential order. Before Nia could respond, Director Kessler burst into the room, her carefully maintained composure cracking. This is an outrage. You have no jurisdiction here, Admiral. Actually, he does, said one of the Secret Service agents, presenting a document bearing the presidential seal. By executive order, OIS is being placed under review, and all detainees at black site facilities are to be transferred to proper federal custody pending investigation. Kessler's face flushed with anger. You've made a grave mistake, Admiral. This goes higher than you know. I know exactly how high it goes, Vaughn replied calmly. And so does the President, now that he's seen the files Agent Harris recovered. From your servers. As the agents moved to remove Naya's restraints, she looked at Vaughn with new understanding. You sent me to find Echo, didn't you? Even before Glass Dagger. I was your mole. Vaughn nodded slightly. I had suspicions. Needed confirmation, but I never imagined what you'd find, or what they'd do to cover it up. His voice dropped. I'm sorry, Naya. I put you in an impossible position. You're not the only one who owes me an apology, Naya replied, rubbing her wrists as the cuffs came off. But you're the only one who's tried to make it right. Access denied. Access denied. Access denied. The error message flashed repeatedly as Eli Chen attempted to bypass another OIS security protocol. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his fingers flying across the keyboard with increasing desperation. Come on, he muttered, trying another approach. There has to be a back door. It was 3 a.m., 36 hours after Naya's release from OIS custody. In that time, Director Kessler had gone off the grid. Senator Williams had issued a public statement distancing himself from Black River, and Admiral Vaughn had been summoned to a closed-door session of the National Security Council. Eli, working from a new location after discovering surveillance equipment in his apartment, was attempting to access the complete OIS database, not just the Echo files, but everything connected to what Kessler had called Black Site Ghost Protocol Class. Omega. His screen suddenly went black, then filled with cascading code. For a heart-stopping moment, he thought he'd triggered a security countermeasure. Then the code resolved into a simple message. Try this key, followed by a string of characters. Eli hesitated, then entered the key. Instantly, folders began populating his screen, thousands of them dating back nearly a decade. Holy shit, he whispered, pulling out his phone to call Camille. She answered on the first ring. Tell me you found something. I found everything. Eli replied, his voice hushed with shock. Someone just gave me master access to the entire Ghost Protocol database. Video, audio, documentation. It's all here. Someone? Camille repeated. Who? I don't know. But whoever it is, they have highest level clearance. The files I'm seeing, Camille, this is bigger than Echo. Much bigger. Send me what you have. I'll bring it to Admiral Vaughn. In a secure conference room at the Pentagon, Admiral Vaughn sat with Naya, reviewing the evidence they had compiled. Despite her release, Naya remained in a precarious position. Legally, cleared but still watched by powerful enemies. The mission within the mission, Vaughn explained, pulling up classified documents on a secure terminal. 2 years ago, I began noticing discrepancies in operation reports from Afghanistan, missions that officially never happened, funding that couldn't be traced, personnel transferred without explanation. You suspected a black operation, Naya said. One without proper authorization. Vaughn nodded. I needed someone I could trust completely to verify my suspicions. Someone with the skills to get in and out undetected if necessary. Me, Naya said simply. You, he confirmed. I selected your team for Glass Dagger because of your reputation for moral clarity as much as your tactical excellence. The official mission was surveillance of suspected terrorist activity, but I gave you a secondary objective. To look for signs of unauthorized American operations, Naya finished. I remember, but you never mentioned bioweapons or civilian prisoners. Because I didn't know, Vaughn admitted, the weight of those words heavy in his voice. I suspected weapons development, perhaps illegal arms trading. Not this. He gestured to the images on the screen, evidence of human experimentation that violated every international law and moral principle. When you reported finding civilians, I tried to abort the mission to assess the situation. By then, Black River was already moving to eliminate evidence. His voice grew quiet. I failed you, Lieutenant Commander, and I failed those people. Nia studied the man she had alternately respected, resented, and blamed for the past 2 years. Why didn't you tell me the truth after it happened? Why let me think I'd gone rogue? Protection, Vaughn replied. If they knew you were acting under my orders, they would have eliminated you immediately. Your insubordination was your shield. Before Naya could respond, Camille Harris burst into the room, laptop in hand. "Admiral, Lieutenant Commander, you need to see this." She connected her computer to the room's secure display. Files from Eli's hack filled the screen, damning evidence of Ghost Protocol operations spanning years and continents. "This is what Eli found in the OIS database," Camille explained, navigating through folders. Project Echo was just one branch of a much larger program. They've been conducting similar operations in Yemen, Somalia, Ukraine, anywhere with enough instability to hide their activities. "Who authorized this?" Vaughn demanded, his face pale with anger. "That's the thing," Camille replied, pulling up a heavily encrypted document. "According to this directive, Ghost Protocol was established, under the authority of you, Admiral." Naya's head snapped up. "What?" Vaughn stared at the document in disbelief. "This is a forgery. I never authorized any such protocol." "The digital signature matches yours," Camille said. "But there's something odd about the timestamp. According to the metadata, this document was created 2 weeks ago, but backdated to appear as if it were signed 3 years ago. They're framing you," Naya realized. "Just like Kessler said during my interrogation, you were always the target." The Admiral's phone rang, a secure line connected directly to the White House. As he answered, his expression grew increasingly grave. "Yes, Mr. President, I understand. I'll be there within the hour." He ended the call and turned to the others. "That was the President. Congress has called an emergency classified hearing. I'm being summoned to testify about my role in establishing Ghost Protocol." "It's a trap," Naya said immediately. "Once you're under oath, they'll use these forged documents to discredit you and everything you've revealed about Echo." "I know," Vaughn agreed, "but I have no choice. If I refuse to appear, it confirms their narrative that I've gone rogue." He stood, straightening his uniform. "Agent Harris, continue working with Mr. Chen. Find anything that can prove these documents. We're falsified." As Vaughn prepared to leave, Naya stepped forward. "Admiral, let me come with you." "Absolutely not," he replied firmly. "You're still vulnerable. If they can't get to me, they'll use you as leverage." "With respect, sir, we're stronger together. They want to separate us because it makes their job easier." Vaughn considered her words, then nodded slowly. "Very well, Lieutenant Commander, but stay close. This isn't a battlefield you're familiar with. All battlefields operate on the same principle, Admiral," Naya replied. "Know your enemy and never give them the high ground." As they left, Camille turned back to her laptop, diving deeper into the files Eli had uncovered. Something wasn't adding up. Why would OIS create such elaborate forgeries only to store them where they could potentially be discovered? Unless... "It's a diversion," she muttered to herself. "They want us focused on clearing Vaughn while they move on their real objective." She pulled out her phone to call Eli, but there was no answer. Her stomach tightened with dread. Grabbing her weapon and badge, she raced for the door. Across town, in a nondescript hotel room, Director Warren Kessler sat across from Senator James Williams and Lawrence Pierce of Black River. The atmosphere was tense, the conversation hushed. "The President has ordered a full investigation," Kessler informed them. "OIS is being placed under oversight. Ghost Protocol is being shut down." "This is a temporary setback," Pierce replied, dismissively. "We've weathered similar storms before." "Not like this," Kessler countered. "They have the videos, the authorization forms, the medical data, everything." Williams paled. "How?" "Someone inside OIS, someone with highest level access." Kessler's gaze hardened. "We're being sacrificed to protect someone higher up." Dawn broke over the safe house where Nia Briggs sat at a kitchen table, steam rising from an untouched cup of coffee before her. 3 days had passed since her release from OIS custody. 3 days of moving from location to location, always watching for surveillance, always one step ahead of those who wanted her silenced. The door opened, and Camille Harris entered, followed by Admiral Vaughn. Both looked exhausted. "They've scheduled the congressional hearing for tomorrow," Vaughn announced, placing his briefcase on the table. "Closed session. No press." Naya nodded, unsurprised. Of course. Can't have the public knowing their tax dollars funded illegal human experimentation. There's more, Camille said, her expression grim. We found Eli. Something in her tone made Naya tense. Is he alive? Barely. He was attacked in his apartment. Professional job, made to look like a robbery gone wrong. He's in surgery now. Did he managed to secure the files before they got to him? Vaughn asked. Camille nodded. He uploaded everything to multiple secure servers. But there's something else. She pulled out her tablet, bringing up a document. He found this just before the attack. It's a communication between Director Kessler and someone identified only as Apollo. She placed the tablet on the table so both Naya and Vaughn could see. The message was brief. Glasshouse protocol initiated. All evidence to be eliminated. No witnesses. Glasshouse, Vaughn murmured. I've never heard of it. Neither had Eli, Camille replied. But he found references to it in the Ghost Protocol files. It appears to be their ultimate contingency plan. Scorched earth. Elimination of all evidence. And anyone who might testify, including us, Nya concluded. Not just us, Camille said, pulling up another screen. Everyone connected to Echo. The civilians you rescued. The medical personnel who treated them. The journalists who've been investigating. They're all targets now. Naya's face hardened. How many survivors are left from the compound? 17, Camille answered. The others have died over the past 2 years. Accidents, suicides, disappearances. 17 people, Naya repeated softly. I promised them they'd be safe. Admiral Vaughn watched her, recognizing the weight of responsibility in her eyes. Weight he knew all too well. Lieutenant Commander, no one would blame you for walking away now. You've done more than anyone could ask. Naya looked up, meeting his gaze directly. With respect, Admiral, that's not an option. It never was. She stood, decision made. We need to get those survivors to safety, and then we need to testify. Publicly, not behind closed doors. The hearing is classified, Vaughn reminded her. By order of the National Security Council. Then we go over their heads, Nya said. The United Nations has a commission investigating war crimes. If we bring the evidence and witnesses there, not even the U.S. government can sweep it under the rug. Camille and Vaughn exchanged looks. What Naya was proposing wasn't just risky, it was potentially an act of treason itself, revealing classified operations to an international body. I know what you're thinking, Naya said, reading their expressions. But we've tried working within the system. The system is compromised. Sometimes the only way to save something is to expose it to the light. After a moment, Vaughn nodded. I'll make some calls. I still have contacts at the UN who might help arrange this. We'll need security for the survivors, Camille added. People we can trust. My former team, Naya suggested. Taylor, Simmons. They've already risked everything by testifying. As they began formulating a plan, none of them noticed the nearly invisible drone hovering outside the window, its high-resolution camera capturing every word spoken inside. In Sati, a private airfield outside Washington, Director Kessler reviewed the drone footage on her tablet. Beside her, a team of elite operatives prepared weapons and tactical gear. They're planning to take the witnesses to the UN, she informed her team. We intercept them en route. Clean operation. No traces. And Briggs? Asked the team leader. Kessler's expression hardened. Highest priority target. She does not reach that hearing. The next morning, as Naya prepared to leave the safe house, Camille received an urgent call. Her face paled as she listened. What is it? Naya asked when she ended the call. They've taken my brother, Camille said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. Arrested him on falsified drug charges an hour ago. They're holding him at a federal detention center. It's leverage, Vaughn said grimly. They're trying to control you. Camille's jaw set with determination. They picked the wrong family to threaten. My brother was a Marine before he became a teacher. He can handle himself. She looked at Naya. And so can I. Are you sure? Naya asked, I've never been more sure of anything, Camille replied. But we need to change our approach. They're expecting us to run, to hide. Instead, let's go on the offensive. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through contacts before finding the one she wanted. Time to call in a favor. 3 hours later, Camille Harris sat across from Catherine Bennett, anchor of the most-watched news program in America. Cameras rolled as Camille, identified only as senior federal agent, her face partially obscured, laid out the evidence of Project Echo, Ghost Protocol, and the illegal detention of U.S. citizens. What you're describing sounds like something from a totalitarian regime, not the United States government, Bennett said, her professional demeanor slipping to reveal genuine shock. That's exactly the point, Camille replied. These programs operate in direct violation of U.S. law and international human rights conventions. They represent a shadow government operating without accountability or oversight. And you have evidence to support these allegations? Substantial evidence, which has been secured in multiple locations. If anything happens to me or my sources, that evidence will be released automatically to every major news outlet worldwide. As the interview aired live, phones began ringing across Washington. At his private club, Senator Williams watched with growing horror as his investment in Black River was mentioned by name. In the Pentagon Situation Room, generals and intelligence chiefs scrambled to contain the fallout. And in her command center, Director Kessler realized her carefully constructed operation was collapsing around her. "Find Harris," she ordered her team, "and locate Briggs. They don't reach the UN hearing." But Kessler had underestimated her opponents. While Camille drew attention with her televised interview, Naya and Admiral Vaughn were already implementing the next phase of their plan. At a private airstrip outside Baltimore, Fareed Nasser, now a U.S. citizen after years of fighting for asylum, helped load 17 nervous passengers onto a chartered jet. Each had been rescued during Operation Glass Dagger. Each bore the physical and psychological scars of Project Echo, and each had agreed to testify before the United Nations Commission. "You're doing a brave thing," Fareed told a young woman as he helped her aboard. "Your testimony will save others from suffering as you did." She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "Will it really make a difference? These people, they have so much power." "Yes," he said with conviction, "because the truth has power too. Lieutenant Commander Briggs taught me that." As the plane prepared for takeoff, Naya stood on the tarmac with Admiral Vaughn, watching the survivors board. "Once that plane leaves, there's no turning back," Vaughn said quietly. "The government will call it treason." "They've already called it that," Naya replied. "At least this way the truth gets told." A black SUV screeched to a halt at the airfield gate. Nia tensed, reaching instinctively for a weapon that wasn't there, but it was Camille who emerged from the vehicle, running toward them. "They're coming," she said breathlessly. "OIS tactical team 10 minutes out. Someone leaked our location." Vaughn turned to the pilot. "Get these people in the air now." As the plane's engines roared to life, a second vehicle approached, this one moving with deliberate speed rather than urgency. When it stopped, the rear door opened to reveal Senator Williams. "This is unexpected," Vaughn remarked as the senator approached alone. Williams looked haggard, his usual polished appearance replaced by a man who hadn't slept. "I want to talk. No recordings, no witnesses. Anything you have to say can be said in front of Lieutenant Commander Briggs and Agent Harris," Vaughn replied coldly. The senator nodded wearily. "Fine. I'm here to offer a deal. The investigation into Black River will be dropped. Lieutenant Commander Briggs will receive a full pardon, public exoneration, and honorable recognition for her service. In exchange, all evidence regarding Project Echo remains classified. The survivors receive generous compensation but sign non-disclosure agreements. And you walk away clean," Naya added, her voice tight with anger. "Politics is about compromise, Lieutenant Commander. No one gets everything they want. This isn't politics, Senator. It's justice." Naya stepped closer, her presence formidable, despite the difference in their positions. Those people were treated like lab rats. American officials authorized torture in direct violation of laws they swore to uphold. That doesn't get swept under the rug with hush money and medals. Williams's face hardened. You're making a mistake. There are bigger players involved than you know. People who will never face consequences no matter what you do. Take the deal. It's the best you'll get. The sound of helicopter rotors cut through the air. OIS reinforcements arriving sooner than expected. Time to choose, Admiral, the senator pressed, glancing at the approaching helicopter. Vaughn looked at Naya, then at the plane now taxiing toward the runway. I think we've made our choice, Senator. I suggest you make yours, whether to be on the right side of history or not. As Williams retreated to his vehicle, Camille turned to Naya and Vaughn. We need to go. Now. You two go with the survivors, Naya said. I'll delay them. Not a chance, Vaughn replied. We stay together. The helicopter was descending now, and in the distance, sirens wailed as vehicles approached the airfield gates. No, time to argue, Camille said, pulling them toward her SUV. Plan B. As they sped away from the airfield, the chartered jet lifted into the sky, banking sharply before disappearing into the clouds. 17 witnesses safely on their way to international protection. In the SUV, Nia looked back at the helicopter, landing behind them. They'll follow us. That's the plan, Camille replied, a grim smile on her face. We're the decoys. While they chase us, the real story breaks worldwide. She handed her phone to Naya, showing her a live stream that had just begun. On screen, Eli Chen, pale but alive in his hospital bed, was speaking directly to camera, presenting the evidence he'd uncovered from OIS servers. Simultaneously, on every major news network, Camille's interview was being broadcast in full, along with selected documents from the Ghost Protocol files. The hashtag #DarkEchoTruth was trending globally, and on the floor of the United Nations General Assembly, a special emergency session had been called to address allegations of human rights violations by U.S. intelligence agencies. The world was watching, and the truth, so long buried, was finally coming to light. The United Nations hearing room fell silent as Nia Briggs approached the witness stand. 2 weeks had passed since her dramatic escape from the airfield. 2 weeks of international outcry, congressional investigations, and the most significant intelligence community shakeup in decades. Now, dressed in her full Navy dress uniform, ribbons and medals gleaming under the lights, Naya stood before representatives from every nation, prepared to give testimony that would change history. Lieutenant Commander Briggs, began the commission chairwoman, we thank you for your courage in coming forward. Please state for the record what you witnessed during Operation Glass Dagger. Naya looked out at the assembly, her gaze steady and unflinching. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the chamber without need of amplification. My silence is not for sale, she began. The truth has names and faces. I carry them all. For the next hour, she detailed the horrors of Project Echo, the experiments conducted on unwilling subjects, the cover-up that followed, the systematic elimination of witnesses. She named names, provided dates, referenced documents that had been distributed to the commission members. These weren't abstract violations of international law, she concluded. These were crimes against human beings, men, women, and children, whose only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were deemed expendable in pursuit of weapons that violated every ethical standard we claim to uphold. When questioning began, a representative from Russia asked pointedly, Lieutenant Commander, are you concerned about being labeled a traitor to your country for revealing these operations? Nia met his gaze directly. I swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That oath doesn't have exceptions for powerful people doing illegal things. True patriotism isn't blind loyalty. It's holding your country to its highest ideals, especially when it falls short. The hearings continued for days, with testimony from survivors, medical experts, and finally, Admiral Vaughn himself. The Admiral's testimony particularly shocked the international community, coming from a man who had spent 4 decades in service to American military interests. I bear responsibility for not uncovering these programs sooner, Vaughn stated. The chain of command failed. Oversight failed, and in that failure, we betrayed not only international law, but our own values as a nation. Back in Washington, the ICAO fallout was seismic. Director Kessler was arrested while attempting to flee the country. Senator Williams resigned in disgrace, though his parting statement hinted ominously that there are bigger players still in the shadows. Black River Consulting's assets were frozen pending multiple investigations. Lawrence Pierce and several executives faced criminal charges for their role in Project Echo and other black site operations. In a ceremony that received considerably less publicity than Naya's arrest, Camille Harris was appointed director of a new independent oversight task force charged with investigating abuses within the intelligence community. Her first official act was to secure the release of her brother from federal custody. Admiral Vaughn, his health declining after decades of service and the stress of recent events, submitted his retirement papers. At his modest going-away ceremony, he made a point of inviting underprivileged youth interested in military service, the first class of what would become the Vaughn Mentorship Program for future leaders. Reese Dalton, the SEAL who had betrayed Nia's team, was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for his role in the deaths caused during Operation Glass Dagger. Before being taken away, he asked to speak briefly with Nia. "I don't expect forgiveness," he told her. "I just wanted you to know. You were right. I should have come to you about my family being threatened. Every day I have to live with what I did." Nia studied the man who had once been her trusted teammate. "We all live with our choices, Dalton. Make something of the years you have left." As global attention on the scandal began to fade, Nia found herself at a crossroads. She had been offered everything from book deals to political appointments, all of which she declined. Instead, she requested reassignment to train the next generation of special operations personnel, with a specific focus on ethical decision-making in the field. One morning, as she sorted through the mountain of correspondence that had accumulated, Nia found a letter with no return address. Inside was a child's drawing of a woman in uniform, standing tall among clouds. The handwritten note, in careful but imperfect English, read, "Lieutenant Commander Briggs, my name is Farah. You carried me from the bad place when I was 7 years old. Now I am 9 and live in Canada with a new family. My teacher asked who my hero is, and I said you. Because of you, I want to be brave too. Thank you for saving me." Nia sat motionless, the letter in her trembling hands, as tears she had held back for 2 years finally fell freely. Weeks later, she stood at Arlington National Cemetery, paying respects to fallen comrades. The autumn leaves drifted around her, as she placed a small stone on each grave marker, an old SEAL team tradition. "They offered me another medal," she said softly to the silent stones. "I told them to give it to you instead." "Talking to the dead, Lieutenant Commander?" came a voice behind her. Nia turned to find Camille Harris, bundled against the October chill. "Sometimes they're better listeners than the living." "I wouldn't know," Camille replied with a small smile. "The living have been keeping me plenty busy." She fell into step beside Nia as they walked the rows of white markers. "The Oversight Commission is making progress. We've identified 3 more black site operations. Shut them all down." "Good," Nia said simply. "And the UN Commission has recommended international protocols to prevent similar programs from operating anywhere in the world. They're calling it the Briggs Protocol." Nia shook her head. "I don't need my name on anything." "Too late. It's already in the draft resolution." They walked in companionable silence for a while before Camille spoke again. "The President is giving a speech next week at the Global Military Ethics Conference. He's asked if you would introduce him." Nia stopped walking. "Why me?" "Because people listen when you speak," Camille said. "And because he's announcing reforms based on your testimony." After a moment's consideration, Nia nodded. "I'll be there." The following week, before an audience of military leaders, ethicists, and human rights advocates from around the world, Lieutenant Commander Nia Briggs took the podium. The applause that greeted her was thunderous, but she raised a hand for silence. "2 years ago," she began, "I faced an impossible choice between following orders and following conscience. I chose conscience, and that decision came with a heavy price. But standing before you today, I can say with certainty that it was the right choice. She paused, looking out at faces from dozens of nations, all united in their attention to her words. We serve to protect, not to hide. The truth is our greatest weapon. And when we forget that, when we believe that anything, even the darkest deeds, can be justified in the name of national security, we become what we claim to be fighting against. As she concluded her remarks and prepared to introduce the president, Nia caught sight of familiar faces in the audience. The survivors of Project Echo, healthy and whole after 2 years of recovery. Admiral Vaughn, watching with quiet pride. Camille Harris, whose courage had matched her own. Farid Nasser, now working as an advocate for refugees. Together, they had uncovered the truth. Together, they had held the powerful accountable. And together, they had proven that even in the darkest of circumstances, integrity could prevail over injustice. Lieutenant Commander Nia Briggs, once shackled in a courtroom, stood free before the world, not as a defendant but as a voice for those who had none, not as a prisoner but as a warrior for truth, not defeated but unchained. When our own government betrays its highest ideals, would you have the courage to stand alone for truth, even at the cost of everything? Like, subscribe, and join us next week for another powerful story of those who dared to challenge the powerful.